Hi guys, Sarah here. Dylan for 2712 requested that I make a video on general tips of how to breed corn snakes. So I thought I'd go ahead and do that for you guys, just so you have a general idea of what I do every spring and then taking care of the eggs and whatnot. I'm hoping to make this a fairly short video just so you get the general idea, but if it ends up being, 20 minutes long, just bear with me. I thought I'd go ahead and start with this pair that I already have together. This ultra male pair in here. This is just a, 28 quart or 26 quart tub, or maybe it's 24, I don't know. But it's just one of the kind of medium-sized tubs you can find at Walmart. Of course, there's holes in the side. I brumated this pair for about 3 months at about 55 degrees. And of course, I do that with all of my corns. Basically, with brumating, you put them where it's cold at usually about between 50 and 65 degrees. You really don't want it to be under 50 degrees, and you really don't want it to be over 65. You want their bodies to be able to cool down enough that they're not going to be burning fat while they're in brumation, but you want them to be you don't want them to be so cold that they actually freeze or get sick or anything like that. So I usually keep them about 55 degrees for about 3 months. And this pair came out about a month ago. This is the female here, and the male is over here, getting out of the tank, of course. They're about 4 or 5 years old, this pair. The female's a little bit older, of course. Normally, people do that. You have to make sure that the female is at least 3 years and 300 grams and 3 feet. That's kind of the general, with corn snakes, the general size you want them. And with males, they can be a little bit smaller, a little bit younger. That's why the female is a little bit older than the male in this instance. And he's bred before. He's already bred to a female this year. And so he's ready to go whenever she is. She already shed also. They both shed pretty early at the same time this year, actually. So they might have actually been breeding a few times. I haven't witnessed it myself. Usually I like to wait until I witness it to separate them. But I have not yet witnessed that from these two. Looks like they're kind of getting ready to do that anyway. But as you can see in here, it's a very simple setup. All I have is their water bowl and this hide box, which is just an ice cream container with vermiculite in it. The reason that I have this ice cream bucket with vermiculite, one, is for a hide box for them, and two, it's kind of a moist box for when they go into shed. Inside is just vermiculite that's been moistened with water, warm water, pretty much with vermiculite. There's 2 cups in there, and I make it just moist enough that it's all basically saturated, but it's not going to actually leak water anywhere. If I turn it to the side, you're not going to see pools of water anywhere. And that's kind of how you want it for everything. And the snakes love it, of course. They get in there and they curl up and they dig in it and everything else. They love it. And it's not bad for them. It's super cheap. You can find it at Lowe's for 15 bucks for a big bag. And that's just what I've been using. It's just it's a nice bedding, and it's really soft. It's really easy to use, and it's probably one of the more ideal beddings for snakes, in my opinion. Of course, I'm using white sheets of paper. It's just printer paper that on the other side there's stuff printed on it, but I put the clean side up just so I can see if if I wake up in the morning and I see that there are certain leftovers from the male after breeding, I know that he's probably hooked up with her, and that's kind of a sign for me to be able to separate them. I usually let them breed 2 or 3 times. If they're breeding actively, and I can tell like almost every day they're hooking up, I usually only keep the male in for a week with her. But if I notice that he's really not that active, chasing her or anything, and they only maybe hook up once a week or something, I'll keep him in there until I witness it 2 or 3 times, depending upon the length of the hookup. You've probably seen a couple other videos of the snakes actually breeding. If not, check out the rest of my YouTube. I have some from last year, and I think maybe one from this year. of breedings so far with this male with another female. I usually after they breed, I keep the female in the same tub the whole time. I don't like to move her or do anything with her that would give her any more stress than she needs to go through, especially since she has to carry the eggs. If she does get too stressed out while she's gravid, while she's carrying eggs, she could potentially not fertilize them, or she could spit them out prematurely, or just not, just she could even get egg bound. Who knows what could happen. So I try to reduce her stress as much as possible, which is why it's important to take the male out also after they're done breeding. And of course, after you take the male out, it's important to take care of the female as well as possible. Feed her everything she wants. Pretty much, that's what I do. I try to feed her twice a week. There's the female there, hiding from him. I try to feed my female twice a week while she's gravid. Pretty much that just ensures that she's getting all the nutrition that she needs for her and her eggs. You don't want to just feed her normal schedule, because obviously if she's gaining weight at a regular pace, that's great. But while she's gravid, it's definitely important to make sure that she's gaining weight even faster, because you want to make sure that she has plenty of vitamins, plenty of nutrients for those eggs, because the better the shells on the eggs, the healthier the eggs are going to be, and the healthier the babies are going to be. And you just want to make sure that you take good care of her. I actually usually put a calcium supplement either in their water or on their food when I feed the gravid females. The calcium supplement that I get, I think it's just called Reptical. I'm not positive if that's what it is, honestly. But it's a liquid supplement that's in a spray, and you can spray it on their food or put it in their water. I usually put it in the female's water. It's simpler than having to put it in the food, in my opinion, because as long as they don't poop in their water, and you can get them to drink their water all the time, which sometimes that can be difficult. But as long as they're drinking, you don't really have to worry about having to make sure that you put it on her food and, not waste it on other snakes' food or whatnot. The calcium especially especially makes sure that the eggs are going to be nice and thick-shelled and healthy. And I usually keep the ice cream bucket in there also. The ice cream bucket is actually very important. You don't have to use ice cream bucket. You can use anything that's roughly that size. As you can see, there's a hole here that she can get into, and it's nice and cozy in there. She can get in there whenever she wants. The plan, of course, is for her to lay her eggs in there on the vermiculite. You don't want her, a lot of times they'll lay them like in the water bowl or under the water bowl or even like in the corner of a tank. If they're just laying them in like the corner of a tank, it's not a bad thing. Or even under the water bowl isn't a bad thing, but of course it's not ideal. You want to be able to just open the top one day and see your female in there with her eggs, and be able to unwrap her from her eggs and then put the eggs in the incubator without disturbing them as much as possible. As soon as she lays her eggs, the best thing to do, of course, is to get her away from them. You want to make sure she's done. I usually, if I see her just starting to lay eggs, I usually give her 24 hours. And then after 24 hours, if she's still not done, then there's usually a problem. She can become egg-bound, and basically that just means that she can't push the eggs out, whether she's just exhausted from the previous eggs, or one egg is too big, or, there's a lot of problems that can happen. It could even be that she's damaged a part of her insides by pushing the other eggs out, and she can't get the last one out for whatever reason. And if that happens, there's a few things you can do, but obviously the best thing for you to do is take her to a reptile vet. You can try to massage the egg out really gently. So like I said, sometimes it's just through exhaustion, and she just doesn't have the energy to push that last couple eggs out. And if you can kind of help her massage it out, then, that's probably the safest way. Taking her to the vet can be very stressful and obviously expensive to the owner, but it is very important that those eggs do not stay in her for more than 24 hours after she starts laying. But hopefully, if you get, hopefully you'll get an entire good clutch. If you do, hopefully she laid them in here. If not, it doesn't really matter too much, as long as she didn't lay them in the water bowl. If they're in the water bowl, they're dead eggs. Don't worry about them. Before you do anything with the eggs, of course, you want to get the female away from them, and kind of check them all out, see which ones are good, see if there's any bad ones. A bad egg as opposed to a good egg. A good egg is going to be nice and round. It's going to be kind of a pearly white. Sometimes they will have like a speckling on them a little bit. Sometimes they'll have like a little snowflake pattern on them. But and that's not always bad. The snowflake pattern and the speckling, that's not going to be bad. A bad egg pretty much is going to be smaller than all the rest of the eggs. It's going to be very jelly-like. It's going to be very soft. The rest of the eggs will be kind of leathery, where this egg will almost be slimy usually, if it's a bad egg. And you really want to just throw those out. There's no reason to keep them. There's nothing in them. I mean, in fact, you could just cut them open and cook them and eat them. Like, they're not even fertile. She never fertilized that egg, whatever it is. And an unfertilized egg is not a sign of an unhealthy snake. It's just a sign of, I mean, you know, it could have been either the female's choice not to fertilize that many eggs, or it could have been that the male just didn't have enough of what he needed to get them all fertilized. Either way, it's not the sign of an unhealthy snake. Sometimes older females won't fertilize as many of their eggs, and you'll get a lot more infertile eggs from them, but that's just how they are when they get older. Okay, after you have determined any infertile eggs from fertile eggs and gotten the infertile eggs out, you want to get all the fertile eggs and put them in the incubator. Pretty much for an incubator, incubators do not have to be complicated, especially not for corns. They can be as simple as just a chicken incubator that you can get at Tractor Supply. You don't have to worry too much about, I mean, corn snakes are easy. Corn snakes are the easiest snakes to breed, in my opinion, and probably in most other people's opinions. That's why they're so popular in the pet trade, because they're so easy to breed in captivity. And, of course, they're beautiful colors and dispositions, but just a chicken incubator will do. They're like $50. And, you know, of course, breeding anything, you do have to put some money in, but $50 is a small price to pay. Especially when you have a beautiful pair like I do here. When you can sell one baby from them for $50, you're definitely going to be making a profit. And it's just worth it to see them hatch, you know. But $50 isn't bad. If not, you can always make your own incubator. I don't recommend it unless you have done it before, or you know someone else who has done it before successfully. I did it a couple years ago, and it was unsuccessful. I ended up losing a clutch of 21 eggs. Every one of them died. As well as a few eggs from a couple other clutches, because the heating unit in the incubator failed, and it failed hot, and it cooked all the eggs. So you want to kind of be sure that if you do make a new one, or if you do make one yourself, or have someone make you one, that it's definitely made as professional as you can. Don't go cheap on it. And you know, as far as buying an incubator, like I said, you can buy a cheap one. Like, one good thing about buying an incubator as opposed to making one is that you know that it was made to be an incubator. It was made to be an egg incubator. It wasn't made to be a styrofoam box or a cooler. It wasn't made to carry fish. It wasn't made for whatever else. It was made to be an egg incubator. And you know that it's got a thermostat on it or whatever else. So it's going to be good. It's going to be worth it. Okay, here is my old incubator that I've had forever, and it's just a chicken incubator. Here's the thermostat, and it is about 80 degrees right now, 82. It doesn't actually have a temperature gauge on it itself. I have a little thermometer that sticks out of it, but I don't have it like actually in it right now because I know that it's set at the right temperature. And inside is one little egg. I actually have some house geckos that I'm breeding, and this is my little house gecko egg, sitting in a little container in some vermiculite, and just waiting. But this is just the basic incubator that you'll need. There's the top of it. It's got some windows. You don't need windows, but if you have windows, great. And I mean, it's just basic incubator. There's multiple ways that you can incubate your eggs. You can do it my way and actually get a container for your eggs, or just use the container that the female laid in, whether you want it to be a little like Sterilite shoebox, or whether you want it to be an ice cream bucket like I use. You can just put that in there. If you only have a few clutches, I mean, honestly, if you look at this, and of course here's my hand, so you can kind of get an idea of how big it is in here. I mean, this egg is little itty bitty tiny, like it's the size of a pea. So you're not looking at a corn snake egg there. A corn snake egg is going to be about, I mean, there's my hand, there's a corn snake egg. And so what you can do is either fill the bottom up with either sphagnum moss. Some people like to use sphagnum moss. I really don't. You can use hatchite. I don't use hatchite only because it's expensive. Vermiculite is just so much cheaper. All I do is use moist vermiculite. A friend of mine uses moist vermiculite and sphagnum moss mixed up, and he just spreads about 2 inches of it on the bottom of his incubator, and he puts like 1 clutch in each corner. I don't do that only because I am afraid I'm going to lose track of clutches, especially I've had some clutches that hatched on the same day, and a bunch of normals came out of them. Now, normals may seem like they're not worth anything, but if you have a normal that has, you know, 5 or 6 heads as opposed to a normal that only has 1 or 2, obviously you want to know which clutch it came from. So I usually do the method of making sure that each clutch is in an individual container that is marked with what is inside of it. Alright, here's a typical container that I would put a clutch of eggs in. You can kind of see it's about 6 inches around, give or take, on the bottom, and it's a little bit bigger on the top. Here's the top. What I really like about these is that, of course, the top is clear, so I can see inside of it, and there's a lot of up and down space for the eggs to expand, because they will expand. And what's also nice about this is generally if you have a clutch of eggs, they might clump up and stand up a little bit, and you want to kind of make sure that as much of them is touching the vermiculite as possible, but none of them are actually completely buried in it. So this kind of gives a nice height where you can actually just kind of set the eggs on the inside, and as you can see, there's probably 2.5 inches. Most clutches won't be 2.5 inches tall. If they are, you kind of want to take apart the top ones and kind of set them apart, or, you know, kind of spread them out a little bit. Because, in my opinion, it's really not that good to have them piled up high either. Because if you do that, for one, especially if you have a lid on the container, you don't want the eggs to touch the top. Because if the eggs touch the top, the moisture is going to settle on the top and then get into the eggs and drown the eggs, and the eggs die. A friend of mine has said to me that any snake that ever, or any egg that ever touched the top of a container died. So you want to be sure that you don't let them expand to the top of the container. And you don't want them to be touching the top of the container. And you don't want to smush them either. So one thing that I always do is I get a couple scoops of vermiculite. Here's vermiculite, and of course this is about as much vermiculite as I would put in it. This is just a little 6-ounce cup. It's not even a full cup, and it's deep enough. You know, this is dry, of course. I just scooped it out of the bag, but I would make sure that it was wet, so if you squeeze it, it'll ball up as opposed to fall apart like this. And but no water will actually squeeze out of it. And you want to make sure it's fairly warm water. You don't want hot water because you don't want to cook the eggs. But you want to make sure that it's warm water and that it's deep enough that you can bury at least, you know, an egg at least 1/3 of the way down. Like I said, you don't want them to be completely buried. If you look at my little gecko egg in here, let me open the top up. It's about 1/3 buried under there. My camera's not very good, you can't really see, but 1/3 of it is buried underneath the vermiculite, and 2/3 is showing. Some people do it the other way, so the 2/3 is underneath and only 1/3 is showing. But I've had a couple eggs actually drown that way, so I don't like to do it like that. And of course, after you get this all set up, you want to make sure that either you have a container that has holes in the side. As you can see, this container has a few holes in it. or you want to open up your container at least once a week, if not twice, 2 or 3 times a week, so the egg gets some airflow. Eggs breathe. Believe it or not, eggs breathe, and they need that new air in once in a while. Corn snake eggs have a little air pocket at the top of them, and their shell is such that air molecules, oxygen molecules, can move in and out of that air pocket, but of course the fluids and everything can't. And that's another thing that I'd like to add is when you do get your clutch of eggs, it is very, very, very important, among everything else, that you do not turn them. I always separate my eggs. If they're in a clump, unless there's only like 2 or 3 that kind of clump together, like, if there's 2 or 3 that are completely flat and they're clumped together, then I'll leave them clumped like that. But if they stack up high, I always take the top ones off and put them on the side, so they at least are touching the vermiculite a little bit. And they're at least, they're kind of buried in there, if possible. But you do not want to turn them. If you turn them, that little air pocket is no longer on the top, and of course the little snake's head is going to be up near the top where the air pocket is. But if the air pocket is on the bottom and the snake's head is on the top, of course the little snake is not going to be able to breathe and it will drown, which is another reason why I said before to make sure that the top of the egg does not touch the top of the container, because any water that's on the top will get in the egg instead of air getting in the egg, and it will drown the baby snake on the inside. You can either keep it clumped together, and if you do plan on doing that, it might actually be safer to just cover the whole bottom of your incubator in bedding or whatever, and then separate your clutches. But like I said, I like to separate all my eggs if possible, and or if reasonable. If it's unreasonable, like I said, if there's 2 or 3 that are clumped up, or even if the entire clutch is clumped up and laying perfectly flat or near perfectly flat, I'll just leave it all clumped up like that. But if it's piled up high, I like to separate them, flatten them out in a little container like this. Make sure to mark the container. I usually don't use Sharpie because I like to reuse the container the next year, and don't want to have to deal with permanent marker. So I usually just get like a sticker and put stickers over it every year for whatever clutch is in there. The parents, when the clutch was laid, when it's due to hatch, blah 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 blah. And that just makes it a lot easier to be able to keep track of what's what. Now once your babies hatch, it's important to have homes for each of them. Baby corn snakes, and this is more of a corn snake colubrid video for those of you who want bigger containers, but for once your corn snakes hatch, you need to make sure you have homes for each of them. And these little take-along food containers are perfect. As you can see, this is actually a 6-month female normal, 6-month-old female, and she has been living in here since she hatched. And I tried to put her in a bigger container, but she wouldn't eat, so I put her back in the small one, and she's eating again. Normally I don't keep them in here up till 6 months old, but she likes it a little bit better, so I thought I'd at least kind of show you what's going on. These are little tiny deli cup things that you can buy, honestly, at Walmart. You can buy like 50 of them for $2 or something. I mean, it's crazy. And my little gecko egg that you saw earlier was also in one of those little cups. And by the way, you can house individual eggs in those cups too. If you want to do individual eggs, all power to you. It's very difficult, but those little cups are ideal for doing that. But I use them as water bowls for the little snakes. And this works perfect. I know I didn't mention it earlier, but when incubating, I usually incubate my eggs, I think I might have mentioned it, maybe not, but I usually incubate them at about 84 to 86 degrees, give or take, if possible. I mean, you can incubate them lower than that. You really don't want to incubate them higher than that, because if you incubate them in the 90s, it can kill them. They do kind of get cooked, or they grow so fast that they can have problems, genetic problems, like they might be kinked because their body grew faster than their spine, and so their spine is stretched and it causes a kink. Or they could have other deformities. Maybe their chest didn't close up as well as it should have, and so, or maybe it didn't close up at all. Some snakes have hatched, and their chest didn't close up, and all of their organs, like their heart and everything, were sitting outside of their body. And so it's important to incubate them at a correct temperature. Of course, you want to make sure that it's over 75 degrees. You don't want it to be too cold either. If it's too cold, of course, the eggs cannot grow and they just die. So I try to incubate, I honestly try to keep them around 80, 82 for my own personal preference. A lot of people incubate them at about 84, 86 because they do grow a little bit faster. You should expect them to hatch in roughly 2 months, give or take a week or so, or two. Of course, mine are going to take a little bit longer to hatch because I incubate them at a lower temperature, but it doesn't hurt them. When you're incubating, it's definitely important to make sure that all the eggs are moist and there's a really high level of humidity. I try to keep my humidity at least 80%. And you can get a hygrometer thermometer just to stick on the inside of your incubator pretty easily. I mean, if you have an incubator like mine that doesn't have a thermometer attached to it, just go to a pet store and get a hygrometer thermometer thing. It's usually in a little round thing that you can just stick on the side of your incubator, and it'll tell you the percentage of humidity as well as the temperature. And so I usually say 80 degrees, 80%, and that's ideal for me. That way I know that the eggs aren't going to be, they're not going to grow too fast, they're not going to grow too slow, and of course the eggs won't dry out. If they dry out, of course, obviously the babies can die because they don't have any fluids to live in. So you want to make sure that there is a high level of humidity there also. And when it comes to the hatchlings, of course, some of them are going to be really finicky eaters. I'm not going to lie. Baby corns are notorious for being finicky eaters. You will get some. It also depends on incubation too, I think, personally. The longer you keep them in the egg, the lower the temperature that you incubate them at. For one, you'll probably get more females in the clutch, because males usually, the faster the bodies grow, the less complex their organs can be, which is also another reason why I don't incubate at a high temperature, because their organs are generally not as healthy. Like their heart isn't going to be able to get all the time it needs to grow and everything. But also, the less complex the organs, the more likely it is that it'll have male organs, because female organs are much more complicated and they just take longer to grow. That's why I incubate mine at just a lower temperature, because one, nobody wants to buy males when they're adults, and two, because I know that even if I know that I will still get males even if I incubate at a low temperature, but they will still be 100% healthy. And normally, since it does take them longer to grow, they will be a lot more healthy in the egg, and they will have a much better feeding response, and it'll be easier to get them to eat the first time. I mean, getting them to eat can just be terrible, and some of them, especially ones that I've noticed were in bigger eggs and ones that incubated longer, they just came out of the egg hungry. I mean, they absorbed all their yolk and they came out of the egg wanting to eat. Others, especially ones that were in smaller eggs or incubated quicker, a lot of them died of starvation because they would not. So you just got to make sure that you incubate correctly. I know that it can be hard to wait, and I know I get impatient too, but it's important to just remember that it isn't your patience that is important, it is the life of the snake that is inside the egg. If you notice eggs that are turning brown or eggs that have mold on them or anything like that, take a good look at them while they're incubating, because if they turn brown or if they turn black, it's most likely that egg is dead, especially if it becomes slimy on the outside. I don't know what it is about the sliminess, but most dead eggs do become slimy. You want to make sure to remove that from the clutch, even if it is buried way down in there. If you keep your clutch together, it's just important to remove that egg, because because it's bad, it can make other eggs around it go bad. So you want to make sure you get rid of that. You may experience mold on your eggs, that's not always a bad thing, and it's not a good thing, of course. But the mold doesn't usually hurt them, unless you notice that any egg with mold on it is turning brown, or vice versa, like a brown egg or a discolored egg has mold growing on it, and it's the only one that has mold growing on it. It's usually a bad egg. Now, not always. I had one last year. The egg was green on the inside, and you could see some of the green on the outside also, and I thought for sure that it was a dead egg. And then, of course, it started growing mold, but it was still kind of pearly white, and I wasn't sure what to do, and I just waited it out, and sure enough, a nice healthy baby hatched out of it. So, you gotta kind of learn the signs, but if it's really, really discolored, and it starts turning brown, or it starts turning black, it's probably a bad egg, and it's better, I mean, if you don't want to throw it away, if you don't want to get rid of it, just separate it. Put it in one of these little containers with a lid on, or even with the lid off if you prefer, just to separate it from the rest of the clutch. And if you notice it's smelling real bad, then you know, okay, well, I tried to save it, but it was a bad egg. And then if it turns out that, you know, it hatches with all the rest of them, then, well, it's a good thing you kept it and held on to it. So, it's up to you. I normally give every egg, I never really give it an egg every chance it can have. I don't like to give up on eggs, because giving up on eggs is giving up on baby snakes. So I try to save them if at all possible. Now, a lot of people ask me, when it comes to baby corns, can you put them together? Or when it comes to any corns at all, can you put them together? The answer is, it depends. These two females are obviously roughly the same size and same age. They're both about 10 months old, and I have a little albino motley and a hypo female. They're both females. I don't recommend ever putting two of the same gender in the same container. When you first have hatchling baby snakes, you don't want to put any of them together, because they have been known to eat each other as babies. I've never had this problem myself, but it has happened, and you just don't want to have that. So it's important to make sure that you can house all the baby snakes that you have. And then once they get used to eating mice, then you can kind of put them together. These two females have been together probably for the past 4 or 5 months with no problems at all. And like I said, they're roughly 10 months old, so I put them together at about 6 months old. And they've been doing just fine. I also have two males about the same size together in a different tank. You can put two females together, and you can put two males together. You don't really have to worry about that with housing when they're older, but remember, two males can fight with each other, especially during breeding season. So I usually make sure that all my males are separated during breeding season, as well as my females, especially if they're breeding. If they're not breeding, like I said, I usually keep at least two females in the same container, just to kind of, for one, save on space, and there's really no reason not to, in my opinion, unless you notice a problem. But I have not had a problem so far with keeping non-breeders together. Even adult non-breeder males I have kept together, but I do try to keep them away from even the scent of the breeding males, because the scent of the breeding males can cause other males to kind of go crazy, and they want to fight each other. So I kind of try to keep them all separated. With baby snakes, it's definitely important to try to feed them, but you want to wait until they have their first shed first. And I usually wait. It usually takes them a week to 10 days to shed for the first time, baby snakes. And there's no reason to try to feed them before that, really, because they already have yolk. They still have yolk in their system, and they're absorbing that and using that as food. So for about a week to 10 days, they're fine. Let them shed, and even after that, some of them, I've had some that didn't eat for a week even after they shed for the first time. And to get baby snakes to eat, like I said, some of them come out of the egg ready to eat your hand off, but some of them are very, very picky eaters, and it's important, if they don't eat after a week after the first shed, so if they don't eat 2 weeks after they hatch and they haven't had any interest in food, and assuming you're trying to feed them pinkies, pinky mice, whether frozen or live, it's time to try something else. If they're definitely not interested in the pinkies, then you need to work on getting something else. What I have done, and it works pretty well, there's a few tricks. One thing that I've done is I actually am raising house geckos now, as you saw the little egg in the incubator, and I take the sheds from the geckos and just tear a little piece off of the shed skin and put it on the nose of a pinky mouse. And that alerts the baby snake to the smell of lizards, and they love to eat lizards. Note, do not ever put a lizard in with the corn snake. The corn snake will try to eat it no matter what size it is. I learned that the hard way with my old crested gecko. So do not put lizards in with corn snakes. They will try to eat it, unless the lizard's so big that it would eat the corn snake, in which case you don't want to do that either. So don't ever mix the two, unless you want something to get eaten. Either way, corn snakes love lizards, and so scenting a pinky with a lizard, or just putting the shed skin of a lizard onto a pinky, really sets those baby corns into feeding mode. I had to do that with the sister of, or the brother of this hypo here. He was such a picky eater, and as soon as I put a piece of that skin onto a pinky, he's eaten every day since then. Every day I've tried to feed him. So you can do that. You can also try tuna water. Sometimes I will thaw out my frozen thawed pinkies in some warm tuna water instead of regular water, and then try to feed them to the snakes, and that helps sometimes. You can also try fried chicken. I can tell you that these snakes love the smell of KFC. What I actually did was I ordered KFC in those little styrofoam containers that they sell their chicken in, and I used those containers as feeding containers. And that's another trick. If you are trying to feed your snake in the container that it's living in, and it's just not eating, doesn't have any interest in the food, get a little container that you can put it in. I've tried ones like this, and the ones that are shorter, they only go up to about here instead, and those seem to work a little bit better even. But those work really well. Just put the snake in there with the pinky, and it might actually help them want to eat it too. A couple other tricks you can use besides the scenting with lizards and the scenting with chicken and putting them in separate containers. And of course the scenting with tuna is actually put the pinky into the snake's mouth. I know that sounds odd, but some snakes just don't know what to do with it. They can smell it and go up to it, but they just don't know what to do with it. And so sometimes it just takes opening the mouth, putting the pinky in for them to realize this is food and that they need to eat it. It's called assist feeding, and it's not harmful to them. It can stress them out with, you know, a big giant opening their mouth and they don't know why. But if it gets them to eat, it gets them to eat. And as long as they're getting healthy, you know. And you shouldn't have to do that more than 3 weeks in a row. Baby corn snakes you want to try to feed at least twice a week. And these guys, since they're almost a year, they're still eating twice a week at this age. But once they turn a year old, I'll go to once a week instead of twice a week. Once they get up to eating larger fuzzies. Right now, these two are eating small fuzzies. And there's a few other tricks when it comes to feeding corn snakes. The pinkies, you can always either poke a hole in the pinky's head or cut the skin off the head of the pinky. Sometimes it just takes the smell of blood for the snake to want to eat it. But there are those cases that no matter what you do, no matter what you try, whether you actually buy lizards for your snakes to eat, which is not a bad idea. The lizard, you know, that's what they eat in the wild. So if you buy lizards and they still don't want to eat it, they don't want to eat anything, you can try buying some stimulants. Honestly, try, I'm trying to think of what the name is of it. Well, it's a liquid that you give babies that have stomach issues. Pedialyte is what it is. Sorry, I had to go look at the container. It's sitting right over there, but I couldn't read it. I try Pedialyte in their water, and make sure they are drinking water. That's one big thing that it's hard to get baby corn snakes to do, is actually drink water and eat, because they don't know how to live. They really don't. They are, they're not dependent on their parents in the wild, but of course in the wild, a clutch of 15, probably only one will live, or two maybe. And it's just the way that the life cycle is, and you're gonna have some losses probably, and don't get discouraged if you do. Sometimes it doesn't matter what you do, you can't keep a snake alive, and I've learned that painfully through a few deaths here and there, and it's unfortunate, but just remember not to be discouraged if there are a few that don't make it. Of course, you want to try everything you can, but there is a point when you can't do anymore, and you have to remember that it isn't necessarily you. If you have a bunch of them that are dying, then it might be you. But if you only have one or two per clutch that die, it's honestly, that's what's common. I mean, if you have a clutch of 15, it is almost guaranteed that you're going to have two die. It's just kind of the way that the cycle of life is. And for baby snakes, it's important that you do keep them moist. I always keep my baby snakes in the same kind of containers that I kept the eggs in, and for the first week until they shed, I keep them in the same bedding that they hatched in, not the exact same bedding, but the same kind of bedding that they hatched in, with the same moisture and humidity and everything, and I keep them in the incubator for that first week until they shed, just because they dehydrate so fast. It's almost like if you're in the tub and you get pruny, and then you get out and it dries your skin out super fast because your skin is used to all that water, and then all of a sudden your body doesn't have that water anymore. It gets dried out. That's what happens with baby snakes. Their whole life up to that point, they've been in fluid, and if you take them out of that fluid, they can dry out really easily and dehydrate and die. So you want to make sure that you keep their humidity level as high as you can, really, at least as high as you were keeping the eggs' humidity, or maybe even higher. I mean, 90% humidity is probably the best you can do for those guys. 90 to 100 even. If you have it at 80, it's not the end of the world, but the higher the humidity is, the best for those little baby snakes. Alright, now back to the adults. I've explained a lot about how to take care of the eggs, but I'd like to explain a little bit more about how to take care of the female after she has laid. She will lay and she will be exhausted. So, like I said, give her 24 hours after you notice her start laying. If you notice it when you leave for school in the morning, wait until you leave for school the next morning to do anything with her. And in fact, even if you give her 2 days, as long as you check on her, before you leave for school the second day, and make sure that she doesn't have any eggs in her still. If she's okay, you can probably still leave her until you get back home from school. Just leave her for a little bit to rest. You want her to have a little bit of a period where she can just sit there and she doesn't have to worry about it. Normally you don't have to worry about being bit by a corn snake, but removing the corn snake from her eggs, that's going to be the one time that you might get bit, because they are very protective of their eggs. Eventually they do leave their eggs in the wild, but being in captivity, they're in the same little tiny container with their eggs. There's nothing around to scare them except for you, and so a lot of times they will just sit wrapped around their eggs. And as you can see, these two were probably breeding in the time that I was explaining everything to you earlier. So hopefully she's got some eggs coming. But after she's done laying, and you take her away from her eggs, keep her in the same container that she was in, and if you can, give her back her container that she laid her eggs in. Sometimes I'll actually just take the eggs out of the container and leave her. Instead of removing her, I just remove the eggs, if possible. If not, removing her and then putting her back in. If you can't give her the same container, at least give her another one that she can hide in, that's very similar, has the same bedding in the bottom, just so she can be comfortable. That's the most important after that, is to make sure she's comfortable. Wait a couple days after she lays her eggs, and try to feed her again. just a small meal. You don't really want to go with something really big at first, right after she lays, because it can kind of almost stress her body out too much after laying. So for an adult corn like her, I would normally give a small mouse or kind of a hopper, maybe a weanling kind of size mouse. If you have a really big female that just laid, and she honestly doesn't look like she lost that much weight, you can probably give her a small adult mouse, but you really don't want to tax their body any more than you have to with feeding them. It can almost do more harm than good. And then I wait a week. The next week I feed her something a little bit, I wait a week and then I try to feed her something a little bit bigger each week until she's back up to her normal feeding schedule of one adult mouse or so. I actually try to feed her 2 adult mice after that, just to get her weight back up, because she will most likely have lost a lot of weight after all those eggs. So you want to kind of make sure that she gets back up to her normal weight. If you bred her and she was, say, 375 grams when you put the male in with her, you want to get her back up to 375 grams ideally, because she will have gone down in weight for sure. And you can double clutch them, which basically means breeding them twice in one breeding season, but I never recommend it. I've only purposely done it once, and that was because the female was so big and heavy. She honestly, I think she only lost maybe 20 grams from laying eggs, and she was about a 600 gram female. And so she was still super healthy, and she gained her weight back right away, and so I figured, some of them will double clutch anyway, so I thought I might as well try to go ahead and double clutch her, and she did great. But generally, I would say it's a bad idea, especially for ones this size. The female of these 2 is about 330 grams, and the male is about 310 maybe, and her being not huge, that's her there, I would not double clutch her ever, unless she somehow got up to at least 500 grams. I would never double clutch a female that started out at less than 500 grams. It's just so taxing on their body. It's not good for them, and it can really hurt them. It can kill them, actually, to double clutch in a year. So I just would say it's safe to stay away from that. And keep the male and female separated for the rest of the year. Generally, I would say don't house a male and female together unless it's for that 1 week that you're breeding them. It's just not a good idea. If you do double clutch them, do the same thing that you would do from the first, but you want to make sure you watch the female a little more carefully, because the second clutch in a year can kind of be more stressful on them. I guess that's about it. I think I've covered just about everything when it comes to breeding corns. I'm sure that there are other things, but that's the basic gist. So thanks for watching, guys, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Comment with questions. Thanks again for watching.